Hi, it's Marlene Ike. Do you ever find yourself thinking, if only my days were different? Or what would it be like if I could? Or even, wouldn't it be nice if my life included? Well, whenever you find yourself thinking something along those lines, what holds you back from just doing it, whatever that thing is that you wish you had? In today's world, there are so many opportunities directly available to us. And the old default path of college, job, married, house, kids doesn't have to be everyone's path. It's no longer the only choice. When you can work from anywhere with anyone, you open up so many paths for your life. So now your job is to purposely, intentionally design your life with the priorities that are important to you. I wanted to dig into this concept more, so I invited Stacie McCracken to give some additional perspective. Stacie lives in Western Ohio and recently opened up shop as Stacie McCracken Consulting. We talk about designing your life, being a rock star mom and professional, fears about others thinking you're a failure, and what we might name a stutter step, and lots more in this great discussion. Enjoy my conversation with Stacie McCracken. Well, Stacie, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm so glad we could talk.
I'm so glad we can sit down and have this conversation.
So let's tell everyone where we are first, because when I listen to podcasts, I like to be able to picture where people are. We are sitting in your house at your kitchen table.
We are, and we're in Western Ohio, the little town of Anna, so about halfway in between Dayton and Lima,
awesome.
If you are familiar with Ohio.
Yeah. You're not too far from I-75. Most people know where that is. And give us a little bit of a background here about your family, your community, kind of this space where we are today.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Western Ohio likes to pretend they're God's country, and we're wholesome people, and we're in a little town. Technically, you could say we're in a suburb of Anna called McCartyville. So if you want to take our little village and make it even smaller, that's technically where we're located today. And what I think is really cool about the area that I live in right now, I'm 10 minutes from my parents' house and 10 minutes from my in-laws. So we did not pick sides. We chose right in the middle of it, surrounded by fields, Catholic churches, a little bit of everything. So it's a nice little town and a great place to start our family.
Yeah. And so you mentioned your in-laws. You are married. Your husband, Derek, is an ag teacher.
Correct.
And you have a wonderful other addition to your family.
Yes. In May, we had a little girl join us, little Sawyer Nicole. So she's about 4.5 months. We're still in that stage where we count each month and are checking off all the milestones as they come.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so that kind of lets us know who you are, maybe on the personal side of things. Just to kind of kick things off quickly, can you give us the brief, big picture perspective of what the professional side of things looks like for you right now?
Sure. So I run my own communication and consulting business, Stacie McCracken Consulting. My family likes to say I'm a super creative person and have a really lame business name.
But everyone knows what it does.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. I get to help organizations, specifically small businesses in agriculture, with their communication and marketing. So I do a lot of assistance with social media plans and strategies, and then also some customer and consumer relations.
And in full transparency, one of your clients is Herdmark Media,
Exactly,
of which I am a co-owner. So Stacie and I get to interact on some projects there, and we're just always so grateful at Herdmark when Stacie can work on a project with us. And so when I reached out to you about having this conversation today for the blog, I said I wanted to talk about designing one's life on purpose. So to set the stage a little bit for that, I think that for a long time, especially maybe for the couple of generations before us, I can put the two of us in the same generation, right?
Certainly.
So for a couple generations before us, there was just sort of this model of you're going to go to college and then you're going to get a good job, and you're going to get married, and you're going to buy a house, and then you're going to have kids, and there you go. Like, that's the path to follow. And that's maybe no longer the default case with our generation, in part because people do things in all kinds of orders now, for sure. You don't even need to go to college in order to learn the things you want to learn, or you can move around a lot of different times, and there's so many different ways to do life. But also this idea that because there are so many opportunities for us to work remotely, to work on our own, and still work with clients across the country. You have plenty of other really cool clients in addition to Herdmark that you work with. Some are not even in this state. That there are just so many different opportunities and ways to do that. So not only is kind of that old pathway not the norm for a lot of people, but there are also just so many other opportunities. And so I wanted to talk with you about how do we go from just, okay, letting life happen to really intentionally designing that. Is that something that how big of a role has that played in your life so far?
Designing my life has been a huge part of where I'm at today and where I hope to head. When I went into college, I took up all the opportunities that the Ohio State University had to offer. And I had internships all over the country, but I knew I wanted to keep family a number one priority. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do that, but I really admired my mom's ability to run a successful business, but still be a rock star mom. And so when I started taking on different opportunities, I held that in the back of my head. How can I really readjust my life to make sure I keep family as that number one priority? And so after being a Buckeye, I went on to work for a commodity organization, and I loved it. We traveled all the time. I got to see all parts of the country. I was running multiple communication platforms. I was a 23-year-old working a very seasoned job, so I was thriving. I loved every second of it. But there came a point where I realized I wasn't living out my ultimate goal of putting family first. And so that's when I decided to step back and design my life, because I only get to do this world one time. And so let's see how we can change up the order to keep family number one.
So was that kind of opportunity thrilling? Oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I can do how this, or was it just like totally scary? Like, oh my God.
It was terrifying. I'd be lying to say if I just knew I was going to turn a page and come home and start my own consulting business. But there were a lot of conversations I had with a variety of mentors, and they kept saying, Stacie, we live in a world today where you truly can do whatever you want. And if that's where you stay with your current organizations and adjust the way you're working and operating, or if that's starting something new, just go and do it. And I'm forever grateful to have a supportive husband with a steady teaching job that said, let's jump and go do this, because there's really no better time than today. And I knew if I didn't make this jump, I would miss out on some other cool opportunities that were coming along the way. So I was terrified. I think for weeks on end, I said, no. I'll figure out how to make everything work. But I ultimately took a turn and made some changes.
So when you're going through that process of going, okay, I can leave what's familiar and go do something different. And it doesn't necessarily mean totally leaving your job and starting a business. It could mean just simply changing the way your current job works, and it's not even just about your job. It could be where you live, the kind of other projects you're involved in, outside work, and things you want to do in your community or family. I mean, this isn't just about your work and your job. But when you're thinking about leaving whatever that familiar space is and doing something different, what are some of those fears that we have to think about? Maybe what were some of the fears that you thought about, that you think other people think about?
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, these list of fears that I'll say some were crazy and silly and not true, and some of them were honest fears to think about. But so a little more background. My original job right out of college for a commodity organization, my husband and I got married and we moved back to our hometown. So I was driving an hour and a half one way to my office job. And when I decided I wanted to change my priorities and make sure family rose to the top, I had the fear that if I had that conversation with my supervisor, he would tell me I was crazy and I needed to suck it up, and spending 3 hours on the road was no big deal because I knew plenty of people that did that. I worried if I would completely change from my secure job and start an unknown business, we would have no money. We're a young couple and finances are real. Mortgage comes every month and you have to pay some of those different bills. So I was really scared that we wouldn't be able to make money. And then there's always that fear that they or my friends or college roommates are going to think I'm a failure. And you know, you work and you graduate from college to be successful and go on to do great things. And I was scared to stutter step. I was scared to maybe take a step back in my progression or flatline. It's all those crazy fears of the unknown or what someone else might think. I also had the fear, since I decided to start my own business, that I wasn't qualified enough. You know, what made a 24-year-old qualified to start my own business? I mean, I don't enjoy numbers. I'm a communicator. And so how was I supposed to invoice or make sure I did some of the day-to-day administration work that I took for granted in a traditional corporate world?
I want to come back to, well, there's several things in there I want to talk about more, but I want to first come back to this phrase that you used. You said, you know, what about the stutter step? How would people view that? And the fact that our instinct is even to think of it as a stutter step, I think says something, right? Like, because we even go, oh yeah, this isn't like the direct path. This isn't, oh, you know, it's not like you don't just climb the ladder in one organization anymore. You know, it's not even about climbing the one ladder. There isn't even a ladder, you know, I mean, you move around, and yet we still have this sort of tendency to think, well, unless I'm moving in this really linear direction, this thing is a stutter step. And so what do you think that says about, is that just a society thing? Is that something we just tell ourselves?
I think it's a society thing. I think sometimes it's just a lack of confidence. I love the book Lean In, and they talked about how your career is a jungle gym and not climbing a ladder. Yeah. And, you know, that book really paints the picture in the light of what women view those struggles as. And so I think we'd like to stay focused on the end result, and we believe we always need to be taking a step forward. And so that's why we put those silly parameters on ourselves that if we're not moving forward, we're losing. And you're right, the stutter step was just in my own head, and it was no one externally was questioning what I was doing. They all thought it was awesome that I took the leap. So I could have failed. And the community at church on Sunday, I remember someone saying, Stacie, you work out of the house now? Oh my gosh, that's remarkable, and all of this stuff. Yeah. And I kept thinking, I don't even have my first paycheck. And she doesn't know I only have 1.5 clients. And, you know, I think we discredit ourselves before we can even have the chance to truly evaluate what's going on. Well,
okay, one thing in there that you said that is so true. We might be thinking, oh, everyone out there, they, right? They are going to view this as a stutter step. They're going to view this as a failure. But what some of they might be thinking, if they are real, because most of the time I think they isn't even real, right? But they might be thinking, this is amazing. I'm so inspired that you're doing this, and this is really remarkable, and this is really cool. And so people might be thinking those things just as likely, but we always focus on the
exactly. I think it took me 8 months before I posted on social media that I had left my job at Corn and Wheat. I'd been replaced for almost a year. And I had a lot of people say, wow, congratulations. And then I thought, I did this a long time ago. I actually kind of have things moving. And it was just the silly self-confidence or lack of confidence that I thought people would question or judge, or who knows. I let the they cloud my judgment and honestly take up too much time. I had the chance to create something new, and I was spending silly time thinking about what they thought I was doing.
So the opportunity to design one's life from the bottom up, really scary, as you mentioned.
Terrifying.
There's a lot of fears that come with that, and yet the reward for doing that and for coming up with the plan and then having the confidence to really live out that plan, the rewards for that can just be huge. Have you felt some of that already? I mean, it hasn't been that long that you've been really kind of living your life in this new model, but are you already feeling some of the rewards of that?
It was honestly in the first week of this new endeavor that I felt like a new person. I was also a couple months pregnant when I decided to make this transition, and I was blaming all of my lack of energy on the pregnancy. And really, I think it was more just the signal that I needed to try something new. I needed to start a new endeavor and put myself first. And so by designing my life, and I chose to do that by starting a business, I got my energy back. I got my hum. I was excited. I was energized. So it was almost comical the amount of time I spent questioning and dwelling on if I should do it or not. It was almost an instant excitement that my chance to build my day. I'm a morning person. And so the fact that I can wake up, get things done early in the morning, and then shut it down at 3:00 is awesome. There's times that I have a niece or nephew that is sick or needs watching, and I pick up my laptop and say, I'll work during nap time. Let me go babysit. And it's just the chance to really focus on what's important is why it's been so gratifying and wonderful.
So I want to transition then a little bit here in the conversation to how does one really start to do that? How does one really start to design that? And it's not just about starting your own business, designing your life. Like you said, it could be lots of different things. For you, it meant starting your own business. I want to think about a couple things first as we think about that. So how about this statement? A life doesn't have to exist outside of work. It could all exist together. Do you agree or disagree? Like, do you think work and life are separate? Do you think they're the same? What's your take on that?
I think work and life are the same. And I think we just have one life, and we get to decide how we want to spend that time. And before I took control of my life and started designing my life, I tried really hard to have work, and then in my hour and a half home, I would transition to outside, and then I would always end up firing up my laptop in the evening, so I kind of transition back into work. And really that just left me with a constant pull of feeling like I needed to be here or there, or when we were traveling for my other job, I would think about the things I was missing at home. And by leaving that idea of one job or one life and just approaching everything with, this is life, this is one umbrella, this is one way, I don't have those constant struggles of feeling like I need to be somewhere else. Yeah, there's times where I would much rather be going for a walk or hanging out with my mom when I really need to type up this proposal. I think everyone's always going to have that. Sometimes the grass is always greener, even if you love where you're currently standing at.
out and about around Ohio today and was so pumped about that and really have had like a fantastic day. But then I got like this picture from BJ back at the office that the farmers are harvesting the soybean field behind our office today. And I'm like, man, like I like being there on the day that they plant and harvest just because it's fun for me to watch. And I'm like, this one day that I was there when I was out of the office. So, I mean, that's just a little silly, superficial thing. But yeah, you always have some of that and a little bit like, oh, you wish you were someplace else for this thing that was happening. It's kind of that fear of missing out, I suppose. But but there's so much less of that when you design it to look like that.
Exactly. And I, now make more decisions on how I want to spend the afternoon. And if I want to go shopping with my mom that morning or the day before, I work really hard and I put the extra hours in. And as my boss or as the CEO of Stacie McCracken Consulting, obviously I have a little more flexibility. But I have friends who have spoke with their bosses and have kind of a little more flexible schedule. Maybe they come in early or they work an extra long day on Wednesday or something. It really just took me recognizing here's one umbrella, there's 24 hours and be intentional with each hour, but it doesn't necessarily have to add up to 8 hours are spent each day working and the rest of the time is spent personal life. Just be intentional, but let it be fluid.
And I think that for many of us, we have this idea that, in order to be, if you're like a functioning adult, you work 40 hours a week and then you have hobbies and then you have, and so you might be listening to this thinking, great, I can design my life. I can decide when the 40 hours are, and that certainly is one approach, but it could also be that maybe if you really look at how you want to design your life, it's not 40 hours. Maybe it's 25 or it's 30 hours packed into 3 days, or it's not, this really isn't a conversation about just how to rearrange things either. It's about what do you even want it to look like to begin with, like at all. And looking at, what do you want your life to look like? And so what kind of finances and resources do you need to support that? And what can you do to secure that and procure that sort of income? And maybe it's a job where you work 40 hours, or maybe it's something else. And I think since there are so many opportunities to connect with people, reach audiences, reach potential customers, if that's your case, that you don't have to just even look at the model of going to work for someone else for 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week, or even working for yourself for 40 hours a week. I mean, it could look completely different. And so knowing that there are just so many, how do you start that at all? How do you start to say, I'm going to design my life? What do you think you look at first?
I think you first have to lay out your priorities.
Yeah.
For me, I was very lucky to know without a doubt family was my highest priority. Yeah. And that was just because I grew up with a tight-knit family. I wanted to make sure I could continue to invest time into my siblings and nieces and nephews, and now my husband and my own daughter. And then after I knew I wanted to keep family first, we did have those real life conversations about how much money do we need to make this house continue to run, and is it really feasible to,
or do I need this house? Could it be a different house? Like,
exactly.
I mean, I think sometimes there are these things that we feel like are like couldn't change. But it's like, you know what, let's really look at things. And if you really want your life to look like this, maybe that doesn't need this kind of property or this. I'm not referring to yours specifically, right? But, like maybe I don't need this house.
I didn't go get a new car when I made this transition because do I really need it? No, my college car is moving along just fine. Is it a little rusty in the corner? Yeah, but I now have a little more time in my schedule. Yeah. And I find that to be more valuable than having a shiny car. So we really just sat through and prioritized.
What's the priority that you knew that family was? I have a friend. I don't think that we've ever talked about this before, but I have some friends from my church who recently moved out of state and everything. And for them, it was because the top priority was about where they were going to live for some opportunities for their kids. And so they knew they were going to move to this certain town, so their kids had the opportunity to do something. And so for them, that meant changing houses, changing jobs, but it all came back to what's the top priority. And when they could recognize that the top priority was being in this specific town because of something for their kids, then the rest of it made sense, And I think so often we're like, well, but okay, here's where I live though, and in this house. And so, but if you really start to say from the bottom up, but do you have to live in that house, or could you live in a different house? Do you have to even live in that city, or could you live in it? You could move,
Exactly.
I mean, and so when you look at going, okay, what do we want it to look like? There probably are very few things that can't change.
Exactly.
We would hope that if you're married, that continues.
Right. And I had a really
keep your people with you, but so many of the other factors in your life really are adaptable.
Exactly. I had a great friend who was tired of bringing work home. Yeah. She just finished a lot of difficult medical school and hated that she would get home in the evening, and she actually lived across the street. We would be frying hamburgers and invite her over, and she'd say, no, I got to finish pushing paperwork. Yeah. And so she left it. She left that job to go be a administrative assistant for a while. And she could not be happier. And it was a tough decision to not use her medical degree that she fought for so hard and worked so hard to get. It was a huge hit financially for their family, but she said, my happiness wasn't worth jeopardizing, right. And her stress level wasn't worth carrying anymore. And so I believe she designed her life just as much as I did. And really it was just taking a job change. And she hopes to go back and use her medical degree later on. But for right now, it's awesome that she gets to clock in at 9, leave everything at 5 o'clock, and be a fully present wife. And that's what she wanted.
And so it really comes back to the priority piece again, doesn't it? I mean, if your priority is, a certain thing, then that's also probably where most of your happiness is connected to as well. And so if you can make that priority an actual top priority, then you're likely to be much happier with the way your rest of life is.
And life is way too short to live grumpy. My husband will tell you that first off. It's just, there's many ways. And, I have other friends who having this certain job within their company is their top priority. And we do miss hanging out on Friday nights, or she has to work really long hours on Tuesdays to make it happy. But she's thriving and she's taking steps towards that goal. And
she's probably loving that. She's really probably finding a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction in that process, for that. Okay, let's think about this piece. I was, in preparation for our conversation, thinking about how we must design our life on purpose because otherwise we risk it transpiring by default right in front of our eyes. So what is the risk of not designing your life on purpose intentionally with your top priorities? What's the risk if we don't do that? What's this default look like?
I think if we don't design our life or live intentionally, we'll always wonder what if. You'll always kind of question what could have been done, or you won't really live with true happiness. I think we get so caught up in what we have to do or the daily grind that we put some of our mental health or our mental well-being aside, and that's not okay. I think we've said before, we only have one life to live, and there's no point in living it sad or tired or stressed out. And if you just let circumstances happen and you continue to default and just let things overcome who you are, I think you're always going to feel like you're missing out on something. And that's not a great feeling to have at the end of a long week or at the end of a long year or month or later on in life.
So if someone is at a point in their life, probably a millennial, like starting out, 20 something, let's say, and they are going, okay, yep, I really want to take a look at designing my life to look like I want. What do you think are the first questions then that you need to start asking yourself?
I think after you figure out your priorities, you need to start figuring out what is going to fill you up and what is going to make you happy. I love communications and I love marketing for agriculture. So I knew if I could do something that would allow me to work in rural America and with agricultural clients, I would be fulfilled. I'd love to share their message and share their story. And so I wanted something that would allow me to do that. And social media is a fun and ever-changing platform. And so I knew I wanted my life to incorporate some type of digital communication. Mm-hmm. And it was just those constant conversations about what excites me, what makes me happy, what's cool and innovative. And it continues to pivot. I think that's why I kind of laugh about what clients I serve or what do I do, because today I work for agricultural clients and small businesses, but who knows if next week or even next month I'm going to be in that same area. So I think if you make the decision you want to design your life and change how things are going for you, never stop reevaluating what's important to you, because those priorities and your passions are going to change, and just keep stepping forward and making sure you're lining back up with them.
I often listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast, on which he interviewed the host of the Design Matters podcast. And one of the exercises that was described in their conversation, I just love this, about designing your life, was, what would your ideal day look like 5 years from now? And in great detail, what would your ideal day look like? And we're not talking like a vacation day or, some like super romantic notion of that, but like your regular average weekday, like what do those ideal days look like? From when you wake up, what time is it? And what does your bedroom look like? And what do you get up and do immediately? And what do you go to your kitchen? And what does the kitchen look like? And where is your house? And, all of those things, because I think sometimes those little pieces just happen by default too. And there are so many pieces of our life that we can just be so intentional about. Like, for example, if you hate the wall color of your bedroom and you've always wanted to wake up in a bedroom that is like lilac walls, you could do that. Like, that's like a simple thing, right? But you could actually make that happen. And so even to the bigger things, like, do you go to an office, or do you work out of the spare bedroom in your home, or are you on the road? And what are you doing? And what kind of people are you meeting with? And how often? And what's the energy level? And all those pieces. And I love that exercise because so I did that for myself, and it really made me think about not just like the vague notion of what do I want my work to be, or what the big priorities are, which is the place to start. I totally agree with that. But the kind of little nuances of the day, like what would you want those to look like? Because the things that we can really describe in great, clear detail, we can make happen for ourselves. And the things that we let just remain in this like vague notion rarely ever come true for ourselves.
Exactly. And I've tried to take that same exercise one step forward. It was from a book that I was reading, and they said to run through that vision every morning in the shower. And so, while I'm
that
washing
really
my
sets
hair,
your intentions. Yeah,
it does. And each morning, I started, not every morning, but I started in college running through that vision. And it's so exciting to see that I am living some of those pieces. And there's parts of my ideal day that we haven't yet achieved, but I feel like I'm making steps towards them. And so when I sit in the shower and run through exactly what I want, it's a little bit of fulfillment knowing that I'm making strides there. And then it's a little bit of excitement to say there's more to come. And today I'm working out of my house, but in the future, I want to walk down the street and have it be a whole business and a whole organization. And right now we're just at step 1, or I like to say at least 1.5. When we get to step 10, how exciting. It took a lot of time, but keep running through that vision, because someday we'll be able to check it all off.
Well, and I love that you bring that up too, about where it goes from here, because it's not as if, oh, great, you're in your mid-20s, right? I've reached this point and I've designed my life. Great, it's done. Like that's not how it works, right? It is what's the bigger vision always? What's the bigger vision, and how am I moving towards that? And I'm taking those steps now, and they're intentional. And my life now is more intentional than maybe it was a year ago, which was more intentional than it was the year before that. But how am I constantly looking at, am I meeting my priorities? How am I moving towards the ideal piece of what I would want that to look like? And that's exciting.
It is. I like to think
Still
about it.
A little scary.
But a little bit. But what's life
also,
if it's not a little scary, right?
Yeah.
I like to think about it as if I'm like coloring in a coloring book or something. And when I started in college, visioning what that ideal life looked like, I, started it by waking up next to my husband, because I, always hoped I would find a soulmate, and I had no idea who that guy would be. It was just some tall, handsome guy.
You had no idea it would be somebody that you had known since
my
grade
entire
school.
life. And, I laugh. In my vision, it was always this tall, 6 foot, dark complected guy. And Derek is a little short Irish boy that, makes me so happy. But it's those, I keep coloring in the picture book. And so it's still really black and white, and there's a lot of things to be decided, but it's assuring to know I kind of had control of it. Yes. And I think that's kind of the point. That's the point of this conversation. Yeah. We have more control than maybe what we give ourselves credit for. Yeah. And it might be scary, and there might be self-doubt, but there's opportunities out there if you just kind of take the step forward and see what happens. I always said the worst thing that could happen is I go back and work at the local gas station, and that wouldn't be too bad. Or the worst thing that could happen is I go help Dad on the farm, and that wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah. Or spend your whole day with Sawyer.
And that wouldn't be too bad.
And that wouldn't be bad at all either. Okay, if people would like to find you online, and we can link to this in the notes on the blog post too, but tell people where they can kind of find you online, or the projects you're working on that you'd like them to see.
You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Stacie McCracken in some form. I do a lot of great work with Herdmark Media, although I'm not the person behind the camera. I help with the logistics to make it happen. So I wear those awesome videos as a true badge of honor. And you can also find some of my work with other agricultural organizations like South Dakota Wheat Commission. And my newest project is the Arizona Grain Research and Promotion Council. But I would love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or any of those social media platforms, because I have really found out that relationships and building a network is the most rewarding and fun part of the industry that we're in.
Well, it's such a small world, really, and in any industry that you're a part of. But I tend to think that people in agriculture are just good people, and so they're so fun to get to know. So, well, thanks for letting us get to know you a little bit better, and for this great conversation about how we can design our life, especially if we're looking at things as a millennial and looking forward to things. So thanks so much for imparting your expertise and insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now that you've heard from Stacie and me about our perspectives on the issue, tell us, if you designed or redesigned your life, what would it look like? Leave us a note in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, live your story.